Hi everyone. Welcome to another video where we simplify clinical research. And today we are going to talk about the 11 principles which are updated as per ICH GCP E6 R3. And before we begin, this is a disclaimer that this video is created for educational purpose only. The views and opinions expressed in this video are my own and do not reflect those of my employer. The content is purely designed to provide the knowledge. And that out of the way, let's begin. Today, we are going to talk about the most important topic of the industry, that is ICH GCP E6 R3 update. Now, many of you might be wondering that why was the update, why the revision took place, and here's why. We are going to deep dive into what has changed in very brief overview, and we'll directly deep dive into 11 principles. I hope that you have watched other videos on this channel, and if not, feel free to explore, as this channel will give you the free quality knowledge and deep dive. I'm planning to make a full length video on ICH GCP E6 R3. But for this video, we are going to stick to 11 principles. Comment below if you want me to make the entire video discussing the ICH GCP E6 R3. Talking about first how ICH GCP E6 came into existence. It started way back in 1996 when ICH came into existence, followed by in 2016 when ICH GCP E6 R2, which we tend to use until January 6, 2025, on which day the adoption of ICH GCP E6 R3 came into existence. Now let's discuss what changed. The ICH GCP E6R3 presents the entire new structure. These changes are the biggest overhaul to the ICH GCP guidelines since their inception more than 30 years ago. In 2016, the R2 version touched upon the REST based approaches and addressed some of the technology advances to keep up with the modern clinical practice. But R3 revision is more transformative. The long awaited and much anticipated version is here, and we are going to see what has changed. A lot has been changed from basic structure to now it has a detailed content. The guidance has undergone the substantial structure changes and is organized now as shown on this slide. That it has more detailed content, it is structured well, and it has core guidance, including the changes and technological advances. The flow of current guidance document is starting with the introduction that explains the purpose, scope, and structure of the guidelines, followed by the revamped principles. Remember, earlier we had 13 principles of GCP, and now we have 11. And that is what we are going to study today. The principles outlines the fundamental concepts ensuring the right safety and well-being, the trifecta, which is core to clinical research for clinical participants for their safety. It also has an added section of annexes that provides the detailed guidance on specific topics such as responsibilities of IRP, IEC, investigators, and sponsors. We have a separate video on IRB and IEC, so search for the video on the channel and you will get great insights. It now also has the glossary included, which defines the key terms within the guidelines, and it has appendices that has additional resources relating to clinical trial aspects, investigational brochure, protocol, and essential documents. Now let's begin to understand the principles of ICH GCP. The principles of ICH GCP ensure that they always lead to the patient safety and data integrity. Talking about the principles of ICH E6 R3, they are flexible and applicable to the broad range of clinical trials. This guidance, along with ICH E8 R1, encourages thoughtful consideration and planning to address the specific and potential unique aspects of an individual clinical trial. This includes evaluation of trial characteristics such as design elements, the investigational product being evaluated, medical condition being addressed, the characteristic of the participants, the setting in which clinical trial is being conducted, and the type of data being collected. Careful consideration of factors relevant to ensuring the trial quality is needed for each clinical trial. The principles are intended to support efficient approaches to clinical trial design and conduct. For an example, the digital health technologies such as wearables and sensors may expand the possible approaches to clinical trials. Such technologies can be incorporated into the existing healthcare infrastructures and enable the use of variety of relevant data sources in clinical trials. This will aid in keeping clinical trial in line with the advancing science and technological developments. The use of technology in the conduct of clinical trials should be adapted to fit the participant characteristics and the particular trial design. And this guidance, particularly ICH GCP E6 R3, is intended to be media neutral to enable use of different technologies. The design and conduct of the clinical trial may be supported by obtaining the perspective of interested parties such as patients, their communities, patient advocacy groups, and healthcare professionals. Their input can help reduce unnecessary complexity. They ensure and improve feasibility and increase the livelihood of meaningful trial outcomes. The innovation that happens in clinical designs and technologies may enable the inclusion of wider and more diverse population of participants and thereby broaden the applicability of clinical trials. Let's move and understand what is different in terms of the quality aspect, which current ICH GCP E6 R3 explains. As you should see on this slide, this is a revamped quality framework. It, as always, starts with the safety of the participants, but it also includes quality by design. This is a new concept introduced into GCP that quality by design should be implemented to identify the factors, that is, data processes that are critical to ensuring the trial quality and the risk that threat the integrity of those factors and ultimately reliability of clinical trials. Clinical trial processes and risk mitigation strategies is the third part of the quality framework. That risk assessment and mitigation must be done in the effective way. They should be evaluated and collected from the beginning and throughout the study. The risk must be identified and mitigated, which is followed by the trial designs, which has to be operationally feasible and avoid the unnecessary complexity. The overarching principles provide a flexible framework for the clinical trial conduct. They are structured to provide guidance throughout the life cycle of the clinical trial. And that brings us to the first principle of clinical trials as per ICH GCP E6 R3. That is ensuring the ethical aspect of clinical trials. Now, the first principle of GCP E6 R3 says that clinical trials should be conducted in accordance with the ethical principles that have their origin in the Declaration of Helsinki and that they are consistent with the GCP principles and applicable regulatory requirements. The clinical trials should be designed and conducted in ways that ensure rights, safety, and well being of the participants. The rights, safety, and well being of the participants are the paramount for all the clinical trials overall for science and society. The safety of participants should be reviewed in the timely manner as new safety information becomes available. Foreseeable risk for the participants must be collected, evaluated, and mitigated as part of the trial design. When designing a trial, a sound scientific goal and purpose should be considered so as not to unnecessarily exclude particular participants' population. The participant selection process should be representative of the population groups that the investigative product is intended to be benefited. A qualified physician, or when appropriate, a qualified dentist, healthcare professional in accordance with local regulatory requirements should have the overall responsibility of trial related medical care given to medical decisions on behalf of participants. However, practical interactions and delivery of the medical care and the decisions can be carried out by appropriately qualified healthcare professionals. Now let's move on and see the second principle of ICH GCP E6R3, that is informed consent process. Informed consent is an integral feature of ethical conduct of a clinical trial. The participant should be voluntarily giving the consent, freely volunteer, and based on the consent process that ensures that participant or their legal acceptable representative, whenever applicable, are well informed and well educated. ICH E6R3 guideline ensures that freely given consent should be obtained and documented from every participant prior to their participation in the clinical trials. For potential participants who are unable to participate into trial, their legally acceptable representatives acting in the participants' best interest should provide the consent prior to the clinical participation. Those potential patients should be informed about the trial in a manner that facilitates their understanding. In an event that a minor is a participant, assent should be collected from the minor as appropriate and in accordance with the local regulatory requirements. That is, ICH 11 R1 clinical investigation of medical products in pediatric population must be followed. The process of information provided during informed consent should be designed to achieve the primary objective of enabling the potential trial participant to evaluate the benefits, risk, and burden of participating into the trial. The informed consent process should be taken into consideration the relevant aspect of the trial, such as characteristics of participants, trial design, the anticipated benefits, the risk of medical interventions, the setting and context in which the trial will be conducted, such as trials in emergency situations, and the potential use of technology to inform the participants or their legally acceptable representatives and obtain the informed consent. In emergency situations where consent cannot be obtained prior to the trial participation, consent should be obtained from the participant or their legally acceptable representative as soon as possible in accordance with the regulatory requirements and processes approved by IRB or ISC. So, what we saw, the first principle ensures the ethics into clinical trials, and the second principle talks about the entire process, the nuts and bolts and mechanisms of the informed consent. Let's move on and see what the third principle says. And third principle is all about independent review process of clinical trial. Clinical trials should subject to an independent review by IRB or ISC. A trial should be conducted in compliance with protocol that received prior IRB or IEC approval, that is favorable opinion. The periodic review of the trial should also be conducted accordance with the applicable regulatory requirements. The fourth one is about the components of scientifically sound clinical trials. That reads as clinical trials should be scientifically sound for that intended purpose and based on adequate current scientific knowledge and approaches. The available non clinical and clinical information on an investigational product should be adequate to support the proposed trial. Clinical trials should be scientifically sound and reflect the state of knowledge and experience with investigational medical products, including, if applicable, the condition to be treated, diagnosed, or prevented, the current understanding of underlying biological mechanism of both the condition and investigational product, and the population for which the investigational product is intended. ICH E6 R3 guideline also mentions that there should be a periodic review of current scientific knowledge and approaches to determine whether the modifications to the trial are needed, since new or unanticipated information may arise once the trial has begun. So, the fourth principle says about what constitutes the scientific and sound clinical trial. Let's move to the fifth principle of ICH G6 R3. That is, clinical trial personnel should be qualified and should have the minimum experience. The clinical trials should be designed and conducted by the qualified individuals. That is, the individuals with different expertise and training may be needed across all phases of clinical trials, such as physicians, nurses, pharmacists, scientists, ethicists, technology experts, trial coordinators, monitors, auditors, biostatisticians, and lists go on. But all who involve into the clinical trials must be qualified by education, training, and experience to perform their respective tasks. The next principle is about ensuring the quality in clinical trials. And this is a new addition because it introduces the concept of quality by design that says quality should be inbuilt into scientific and operational design and conduct of the clinical trials. Quality of a clinical trial in this guidance as fit for purpose. Factors critical to quality of the trial should be identified prospectively and not retrospectively. These factors are attributes of a trial that are fundamental to the protection of participants, the reliability and interpretability of the trials, and the decisions made based on the trial results. Quality by design involves focusing on the critical to quality factors, that is, also known as CTQ factors of the trial in order to maximize the detect , likelihood of the risk, The strategies should be implemented to ensure that they prevent the recurrence of serious non-compliances and risks with the trial results and the safety of the patients. The next trial talks about optimizing the clinical trial processes. The clinical trial processes, measures, and approaches should be implemented in a way that is proportionate to the risk and participants, to the importance of data collected, and that avoids the burden on participants and investigators. The trial processes should be proportionate to the risk inherent in the trial and the importance of the information collected. The risks in this context include the risk to the right, safety, and well being of the trial participants as well as to the reliability of trial results. The focus should be on the risk associated with the trial participation. For clinical trials involving the patients, the focus should be on the risks that go beyond those associated with the usual medical care. The risk relating to investigational products that have marketing authorization when used in the clinical trial context may differ from the usual care of patients and should be taken into consideration. Trial processes should be operationally feasible and avoid unnecessary complexity, procedures, and data collection. Trial processes should support ICH GCP E6 R3 guideline. The key trial objectives. The sponsor should not place unnecessary burdens on the participants or and on the investigators. The next rule talks about the design of a trial protocol that reads as clinical trials should be described in a clear, concise, scientifically sound, and operationally feasible protocol. A well designed trial protocol is fundamental to the protection of participants and for the generation of reliable results. The scientific objectives of any trial must be clear and explicitly stated in the protocol. The clinical trial protocol, as well as the plans or documents for the protocol execution, that is, statistical analysis plan, data management plan, monitoring plan, etc., should be clear, concise, and operationally feasible. Well, we are just three more principles away from completion of this video. But if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, then subscribe and hit that bell notification because I release the videos very frequently and those are filled with the practical knowledge and simplified graphics that make sure that you understand the concept and we together simplify clinical research. Comment what topics you want me to cover in the coming days as I read all the comments and I make videos based on your requests. The ninth principle of clinical trials says that clinical trials should generate the reliable results because remember, the ultimate outcome of a trial is the results they generate. The quality and the amount of information generated in a clinical trial should be fit for purpose and sufficient to provide the confidence in the trial's results and support good decision making. Systems and processes that aid in data capture, management, and analysis, as well as those that help in ensure the quality of the information generated from the trial, should be fit for purpose, should capture the data that requires by protocol and should be implemented in a way that is proportionate to the risk to participant and the importance of acquired data. Computer systems used in clinical trials should be fit for purpose, that is, through risk based validation, if appropriate, and factors critical to their quality should be addressed in their design and adaptation for clinical trial purposes to ensure the integrity of relevant trial data. Clinical trials should incorporate efficient and robust processes for managing records, including data to help ensure that record integrity and traceability are maintained and that personal information is protected, thereby allowing the accurate reporting, interpretation, and verification of the relevant clinical trial related information. The essential records should be retained securely by sponsors and investigators for the required period in accordance with the regulatory requirements. The transparency of clinical trials includes the timely registration on publicly accessible and recognized databases and the public posting of clinical trials. Communicating trial results to participants should be considered. Such communication should be objective and non promotional. That being said, the 10th principle talks about the roles and responsibilities in clinical trials. This principle ensures that the roles and responsibilities should clear and documented appropriately. The sponsor may transfer or the investigator may delegate the task, duty, or functions, but they retain the overall responsibility for their respective activities. Agreements should be clearly defined the roles, activities, and responsibilities for the clinical trial and be documented appropriately. Where activities have been transferred, or delegated to service providers, that is, vendors, the responsibilities for the conduct of the trial, including quality and integrity of data, always reside with the sponsor or investigator, respectively. The sponsor or investigator should maintain the appropriate oversight for all the activities which we just discussed. And the last and the 11th principle of ICH GCP E6 R3 is all about the management of the investigational product. Investigational products used in the clinical trial should be manufactured in accordance with the applicable GMP standards, that is, good manufacturing practice standards, and be managed in accordance with the product specifications and the trial protocol. Such investigational products which are used in clinical trials must be manufactured as per the applicable GMP standards. The measures should be in place to ensure that these products provided to the participants and retain its quality. Investigational products should be used in accordance with the protocol and relevant trial documents. Manufacturing, handling, and labeling of clinical investigational products should be undertaken in a manner that aligns with treatment assignment and maintains the blinding whenever required. Investigational product labeling should follow the applicable regulatory guidelines and requirements. Appropriate processes should be in place and implemented for handling, shipping, storing, dispensing, and returning or even destroying the investigational product. And with this, we came to the conclusion of 11 principles of ICH GCP E6 R3. I hope you get some insights in this video. And if you enjoyed the video, stay tuned for the upcoming videos. Till then, signing off. This is Chintan and Pishet, your clinical research mentor, and keep sharing this valuable videos to your network and comment what videos you expect from me so that I can get those as soon as possible. And we'll see you in the next video.